Hello and welcome to the Curator on Monocle Radio with me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Over the next 60 minutes, I'll be bringing some of the very best interviews and reports from the past week. Talking about this week, we'll look at possible ways of rebuilding Syria.
It's just beyond imagination that we are, after more than a decade now, and the city is still in ruins, and we're still waiting for a future reconstruction yet to come.
Plus, the top Swiss songs of all time. All that and much more in the next hour, here on The Curator, with me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. We start this week's show in Germany. A member of Germany's far-right Alternative for Deutschland party has been fined for using a banned Nazi slogan. Björn Höcke, a former history teacher, denied during the trial knowing the origin of the slogan he used on the campaign trail. We spoke with Alexander Clarkson, a lecturer for German and European Studies at King's College London.
It was used by the Sturmabteilung, which was literally the brown shirts. It was the paramilitary force that both protected the party's interests, but also attacked political opponents, also ethnic and religious minorities across the country, to impose control of the streets. So it's a highly provocative slogan, which also has its origins in border wars and confrontations between Freikorps, those are paramilitary units, and neighboring states like Poland or in the Baltics and so on. So it has multiple meanings, which is one of the reasons why the German state reacts so neuralgically to the use of these kinds of slogans today.
Just tell us a little bit more about what Herr Höcke was saying in terms of what his reasons for using it. He said it was an everyday saying. How correct is that?
That all depends on context. I mean, if you say Alles für Deutschland while watching a football game and hoping that Germany beats England in a World Cup situation, you're not necessarily going to get prosecuted. If you place that statement in the broader context of a speech in which Höcke is making claims about, say, migration or the position of the communities, or using quasi-violent language towards other political opponents, which he frequently does, then that is increasingly placed in the framework of what are known as Volksverhetzung laws about the incendiary provocation of the population, if you want to translate that. And those laws have been around since the constitution was formed of the modern German state in 1949, or the West German state, now the modern German state. So Höcke knew exactly what he was doing. He knew exactly what points he was provoking, and he knew exactly what kind of trouble he was liable to get himself into. But this enables both to stoke his base as well as place himself as a figure that is the leader of the most radical wing of this nationalist far-right AfD party.
And is there also the sense that there's an attempt here to normalise what is generally considered to be unthinkable?
Yes, I think that that's been part of this general strategy, not just going back to Björn Höcke, but other figures on the German and Austrian far-right, like Martin Sellner and other activists who have, for example, tried to normalize other terms, like the term remigration, which is effectively a code word for the mass expulsion, not just of migrants, but of people who have become German citizens and are, according to the views of the far-right, of the wrong racial or ethnic or religious categories. And the Alles für Deutschland slogan also has, again, this sort of, it plays back to the irredentist goals of German nationalist movements. So a lot of people who are close to the AfD or in the AfD, for example, have not accepted the fact that Germany after the Second World War had to give territory or had lost territory to Poland in places like Silesia and East Prussia. So Alles für Deutschland, everything for Germany, can also have territorial connotations that could increase tensions between Germany and Polish or Germany and Czech society. And this all has to be kept in mind by German prosecutors and the German government, that this isn't just about German domestic politics. This is about Germany's place in Europe.
It does seem to be a job for the courts, doesn't it, to try to make sure that checks are kept on AfD and the far-right movement. I think it's not long ago that a regional court upheld AfD's suspected extremist status, and that would, to a certain degree, allow German intelligence to basically spy on and investigate members of AfD. I mean, how well equipped is Germany to deal with what is clearly a serious threat?
I think it's a very, very difficult balance to strike. I mean, in one sense, these kind of court processes allow judges and lawyers to go through the contextuality, in what context were these things said and how were they said and what was the ultimate meaning that was meant. So the court framework, a legal framework, takes this a little bit out of the kind of political debate and enables a kind of a wider judgment to be made about how far and how long far the AfD is going. But it's a very, very difficult process. Before the AfD's rise, these kinds of parties were largely at a regional level, but these milieus, these communities or social groups, they were always a substantial part of German society going back to the Second World War. This never disappeared. But this now happening on the level of national politics makes it much more delicate. A balance has to be found between bringing this under control and limiting the provocative danger of many of these processes without alienating a lot of voters that might feel to be under attack and might actually double down on their support on the far right rather than being reintegrated into democratic politics of the country.
Also this week, the team behind The Urbanists brought you part 2 of our 3-part series on conflict and the city. In this episode, we investigate the rebuilding process, how to retain character when starting anew, and how to be both nimble and mindful during reconstruction. In this highlight, we looked at the civil war-ravaged Syrian city of Homs. Ammar Azouz is an architect who was born in Homs and wrote an article imagining how the city could be rebuilt using digital architecture. He joined Andrew Tuck in the studio to discuss his hopes for peace and the rebuild that follows.
I think the story has definitely changed from 2016 until now, and at that time, nobody has imagined that the war would just continue. Now we are in 2024. The war has never ended. The city still remains in ruins, and I think in 2016, there was a wave of conversations and discussions about the future reconstruction of the city, and I think mostly about recreating a better place, a better city, focusing on public spaces, bringing communities back together. But the following years, they just witnessed more waves of destruction, and it's just beyond imagination that we are, after more than a decade now, and the city is still in ruins, and we're still waiting for a future reconstruction yet to come.
Assad has stayed in power. Are you less hopeful that when any rebuilding does begin, it will be done in a way that is community-focused, open to discussion before people start the rebuilding? Are you nervous about now what a new Homs could look like, whereas in the past I think you were a little bit ambitious about what a new Homs could look like?
I think there's definitely a great sense of grief and disappointment and despair and hopelessness in somehow today, especially after the killing of around 500,000 people in the country, in Syria, and the displacement of more than 14 million people from their homes. So more than half of the population is being displaced. And with all that sense of grief, displacement, and mass destruction of cities and villages, there hasn't been any reconstruction project. So reconstruction often comes with the symbolic meaning of a new chapter, a new phase, an opportunity sometimes, a sense of radical hope, but it's so hard to capture this radical hope today in a time where people even cannot grieve publicly inside the country, when their story is muted and silenced and they are unable even to tell what happened to their loved ones, or to tell that I lost my son or daughter or father or mother, because the government directs the narrative inside the country and oppresses the voices. And of course, in terms of reconstruction, there are many concerns about the future shape of the city, because many academics, activists, journalists, and citizens are arguing that the reconstruction can bring with it new waves of displacement, destruction, and reconstruction could be used as a form of violence to re-engineer demography, to displace local communities from their own neighborhoods towards other places. And there are also concerns and fears that reconstruction could use this notion of Dubaization, which is a term adopted by academics on how cities could be taken as a new Dubai model, where areas for the wealthy and elites and foreigners and investors could be the focus of reconstruction, rather than focusing on the struggle of everyday people who have suffered enormously in the time of the war.
Tell me, do you still dare to dream about what Homs could be?
I mean, I left in 2011 and I have never been able to return since then, so it's difficult to imagine. I know that every dictator would fall, every occupation would end, and cities would free. It's just a matter of time. So that's why it's important to maintain or dare to dream. And somehow it reconnects the struggle that started in 2011, and it's important to capture it and stick to it. But it's difficult. It's hard work. Finding that hope, it's a hard work, but it's essential.
You are listening to the Curator on Monocle Radio with me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. The job of representing the UK in Afghanistan has always been one of the more challenging in diplomacy. One early such emissary, Captain Sir Alexander Burns, fell victim to an angry mob in Kabul in 1841 during a previous British military intervention. The last such ambassador, Sir Laurie Bristow, left Kabul in scarcely less perilous circumstances amid the chaotic Western withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021. Ending a posting he had only accepted a few months previously. He recalls the experience in a new book called Kabul, Final Call. We spoke to Sir Laurie at Midori House and began by asking why he decided to take the job.
I'm a Russianist by background, and my previous ambassadorial job had been in Moscow. I mean, when the job came up, obviously I looked at it very hard and thought pretty carefully about it. I'd done a lot of work on counterterrorism work on the national security dossiers previously. And it was very clear that there's one of those really, really big moments coming. So the decision had been taken by the Trump administration to withdraw US-led NATO forces from Afghanistan. But the job was still to do what we were there to do. So the challenge was to keep an embassy open, but in an environment where everything we were doing had been underwritten by the military presence for the previous 20 years, and deliver what we were there to do, which was to suppress the threat to the UK from al-Qaeda and to work with the government of Afghanistan to achieve that.
But were you optimistic when you embarked that it might still be possible to keep some kind of embassy functioning even after the withdrawal of US and other forces?
I think in these scenarios, you have to be realistic about what's likely to happen. But that was the job. That was the political direction. That's what we were there to do. And I took the job on, I think, like everybody else who was there in the embassy, prepared to give it our best go. But, knowing full well that it probably wouldn't work, that, we would at some stage on my watch have to close that embassy. And even when the time came, my role would be to get our people out of there as safely as possible.
Well, the book is a day-by-day diary-style accounting of the approach to the point of no return. And even though I'm sure most readers will recall the story and the circumstances and certainly will remember the ghastly denouement of the whole thing, it's still a very tense read as you sort of try to absorb in real time what is going on. When you think back on that period, though, was there one particular moment at which there was no getting away from the idea that, okay, this is it, the point of no return has been reached, we are going to have to get out of here?
Yeah, there are several points that I think, you could understand in that way. I mean, one where I think the mood really changed, both in my own mind and more widely and in the government, was the weekend of the 4th of July. So, US Independence Day, that was the weekend where Bagram Air Base closed. And you'll remember the circumstances of that. Essentially, the Americans upped and left the lights on the vehicles, the ones that were still running, keys in the ignition for some of them. But that was the point at which I think everybody realized this is for real. The military drawdown, the military withdrawal is happening. It has pretty much happened by this stage. And as far as the embassies are concerned, this is crunch point. We no longer have that military underpinning. And as far as the government was concerned, the government of Afghanistan, I think that was also a bit of a turning point where the penny dropped that this was going to happen. It wasn't going to be reversed. And I think that's the point from which you can probably track essentially the progressive collapse in morale of the Afghan armed forces across the country as the Taliban military action doubled down and accelerated.
I mean, it is tempting to wonder, reading the book, how much of it you may have left out, because you do tell a story of an extraordinarily focused mission led by an extraordinarily focused ambassador, i.e. yourself, trying to keep a grip on a deteriorating situation and having to make an extraordinary number of decisions, like actual proper life and death decisions, not just about you and your own staff, but the many, many people you are trying to get out of Afghanistan. one. Was it always entirely possible to keep a head that cool? Were there not moments or despair, even verging on panic, or does the Foreign Office kind of breed that out of you by the time you've reached ambassador rank?
Look, to be perfectly honest, no, I don't think anything prepares you for this kind of situation experience. I mean, you do the best you can with what you've got. So, I mean, there were a few points where, looking back on it, it was really right at the edge where a few things had gone a slightly different way. We would have been facing absolute disaster. So just to spell out a few of those, there was a period of about 24 hours after Ghani, the president, had left the country after the government, the state had collapsed, where we lost control of the airport. We didn't have enough soldiers by that stage in Kabul to hold the airport. And so you'll remember the scenes of thousands of desperate people wandering backwards and forwards across the runway, some of them clinging on to an aeroplane as it took off and falling off it to their deaths. So there was a period where we couldn't get planes in and we couldn't get people out. And, that was really quite sobering. It was a very, very long night. The other point, I think, where if things had gone just very slightly differently, it would have been dead British soldiers, dead Foreign Office staff. That was the attack on the Abbey Gate, the Islamic State attack on the Abbey Gate. Slightly different timing, different people in different places. It would have been our people rather than the 170 Afghans and the 13 US service people who were killed. I think the other thing just to underline here is, you can call it what you like. The fog of war, making sense of things after the event. But one of the reasons for writing the book was that there's just so much where you have, a not complete understanding at the time. And, what you're trying to do after the event is just think through, understand what happened there. Could things have gone differently? Could we have done things differently? And maybe just to zoom out a little bit, that was one of the reasons for writing the book. Let's come back to what happened here. We were in Afghanistan for 20 years. We lost 457 British soldiers in Afghanistan, countless Afghans, thousands of US soldiers and other allied soldiers. Why did it happen? Why did it end that way? We need to try and understand, to make sense of that, because otherwise we will not learn from it.
And now to NATO. The NATO military alliance has seen a revival of sorts in the past 2 years amid transatlantic debates over how to fend off Russia in Ukraine and how to defend NATO's own eastern borders should Russia decide to take this even further. That debate will need to include young people in Europe who have to live in this newly insecure environment. And to that point, this week the NATO Military Alliance hosted its 4th annual Youth Summit with discussions across both sides of the Atlantic in Stockholm, Miami, as well as a special panel from NATO headquarters in Brussels itself. Monocle's senior foreign correspondent Carlotta Rebello was there in Brussels.
The target audience here is really that age range between 20 and 35-year-olds. And that's not only those attending and watching, but also they try to make that the vast majority of the speakers, the youth leaders who are working alongside NATO and with the alliance's priorities. And it's very much to have a conversation about, the issues of peace and security that NATO stands for, and looking at why the future generation should care about it, and how are governments of those states within the alliance working alongside NATO to deliver on the key issues that the youth is concerned about.
There is always, I guess, a risk of perhaps apathy from the young. So I wonder to what extent that was discussed. You were at the NATO headquarters in Brussels. You were moderating a session with NATO's Secretary General, Jens Stoltenberg. Tell us about what he said, how he tried to cater to this demographic.
So it was really interesting because one of the things he made a point of really stressing was the importance of continued defense investment. And this comes at a time where the conversation about increased defense spending across the allies of NATO is, paramount. When you have pressing issues such as housing, education, the climate crisis, how do you convince governments to actually invest in defense? And he really made a point about the necessity of doing that to ensure peace. There is a tendency that when countries observe long-lasting peace, that the defense spending decreases. But then when you get to a point like we are witnessing now with the war in Ukraine, the conflict in Israel and Gaza, that tensions build up. suddenly nations can be found on the back foot of this. So actually, the pathway to maintaining peace is through an increase in defense spending. He also talked a lot about the enduring significance of NATO's Article 5. Now, this is the collective security guarantee, which is perhaps one of the key things that you get when you become a member. And he was referring that when alluding to the new members, Sweden and Finland. The fact that everyone is protected because an attack on one member is an attack on all. And NATO at the moment represents 50% of the world's military capacity. That is, it is a big assurance to have that if something would happen to you, you would have the backing of everyone else. So those are just some of the key themes in terms of the importance of thinking about this when thinking about a peaceful future.
So those were the themes that Stoltenberg wanted to bring up for the youth. What was the reaction from the youth to that? They also had a chance to ask Stoltenberg questions. What kind of things did they focus on that they wanted to hear from him?
Well, they asked a few questions about NATO's priorities in Ukraine, and this led to a really interesting conversation on reconstruction and how, reconstruction efforts, as much as NATO will and is involved in them, reconstruction starts with Ukraine winning. And that was something quite significant to hear from the Secretary General himself. There were also questions around NATO's relationships with countries outside of the alliance, particularly those in the Indo-Pacific region. We're talking here about Australia, Japan, and, the threat of China in that region and how is NATO navigating that. And then we also had some more personal questions. It was interesting. One of the last questions coming from the audience in Brussels was whether or not he always wanted to do this. Was this a field that he always wanted to work in? And the Secretary General was very honest and candid in telling that actually the one thing he knew he didn't want to do was politics, which obviously completely backfired, having been, Deputy Environment Minister, Finance Minister, Prime Minister. So he talked about that journey and then ended with some lovely career advice for, young professionals on sometimes it's good to, that things don't always go according to plan. But I guess the best piece of advice he let young people know in the audience was just be nice to everyone you work with, because you never know if you always will end up working with them again. So I think that is quite important.
UBS has over 900 investment analysts from over 100 different countries.
Over 900 of the sharpest minds and freshest thinkers in the world of finance today.
To find out how we could help you,
contact us at ubs.com.
We're back with The Curator, our weekly highlight show here on Monocle Radio, and I am Fernando Augusto Pacheco. To South Korea now, where tourism authorities, of which appear convinced that K-pop can be deployed to boost international arrivals to the country. The Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism are rolling out events which will offer the opportunity to meet K-pop stars and the opportunity to pick up rubbish. The K-popsters will lure youth to sessions of what is apparently known as plogging, i.e. a combination of jogging and trash collection. Let's hear what our panel thinks of it.
First of all, I'm a runner, so the idea of picking up trash as I run and listening to K-pop sounds like a circle of hell to me. But I will say, it is. I was in Seoul, South Korea in 2005 and then back in 2016, and the amount of enthusiasm. They have K-pop museums. It is everywhere. The frenzy, and it may even, bring in outsiders. Chinese and Japanese were there in droves because of this whole phenomenon of K-pop. Gangnam Style may not float my boat, but I think for some people it's just what gets them excited, and it's clearly manufactured and produced, overly produced, to incite people to be active. So it may work.
Julie, are you hearing the word plogging for the first time? I'm confessing it was news to me that this was a thing that people are doing.
I did. I had to look in my Urban Dictionary to see what was going on here. But I will say I think it's kind of fun. It's like I'm a runner too, so I'm like, running, like conservation, like all this stuff, and like some fun music. I don't know. I think it's a little crazy, but like why not?
Are you from now on, either of you, going to run with a big rubbish bag and one of those spiky bikes that you pick up litter with?
Well, I would say if there's K-pop around, you might just convince me. What can I say?
I won't do that, but I'm going to drop the word plogging every chance I get,
Yes.
especially with my 19-year-old son. I want to appear hip.
I did want to ask you both, finally, if you can recall at all any sort of campaign that you think has been efficacious in encouraging people to either pick up their own or other people's garbage. The one that leaps to my mind, and I'm not sure it would work everywhere. It was a bold move and it did work. When I lived in that part of Sydney many, many years ago, it elected a mayor whose name I recall was Ted Mack, who was an independent, and his brilliant idea, and it worked, for cleaning up the streets was literally remove all the rubbish bins. He just removed all the rubbish bins from the street with the implicit, actually it was a fairly explicit statement, take it home. And by and large, people did.
There was a successful story in Bogota where the then mayor basically hired a bunch of mimes to follow pedestrians around and mock them if they broke traffic rules and they dropped litter. Now, I hate mimes. I don't mean to offend any of your listeners.
Well, this is the thing. Every decent person hates mimes.
Exactly.
I'm just wondering, like, how many of these mimes ended up just getting smacked in the mouth?
That's the question. They deserve danger pay. Exactly right, Andrew. But, I mean, they would mock people and they'd tap them on the shoulder and show the trash to everyone, and it worked.
I mean, I generally take the view, and I speak as not a violent person, that mimes are cruising for a bruising even before they start pulling stunts like that. Julie?
I don't think I can top that one. That is absolutely amazing. But I did learn recently that the saying that I always just thought was a saying, don't mess with Texas, started as like a pickup litter thing back in like the 80s. And they had it like branded with like trash cans and stuff, like don't mess with Texas. And like, now we all just know don't mess with Texas. So maybe like don't mess with the mimes either. But I was just like, wow, that caught on.
I don't think don't mess with the mimes, Julie, is ever going to catch on.
And as summer returns to the Northern Hemisphere, what should you be ordering for interval drinks at a theatre or for just some sunny drinks in general? Well, Maxine Cassier, head sommelier at the Aubrey, Mandarin Oriental, have the answers for you.
I was going to say that let's drink some shochu from Japan with some soda water, something very simple, ingredient-led drink with a lot of freshness. Perhaps it could be a roasted barley shochu. That's very delicious, umami, and quite earthy. That's what I would suggest.
So
and if you'd like...
Just tell me a little bit about socho, because it's kind of sort of, a distilled sake?
It could be distilled sake, but it can be made of 56 different ingredients with addition of koji and then fermentation to about 17 degrees and then distillation to a clear spirit. So imagine it's like vodka or gin, just at a lower ABV level with no additives.
So you'd
quite
put
a fun drink.
You'd put it in a Negroni or an espresso martini or something.
Exactly. So, for example, for espresso martini, you can replace vodka with a lower ABV roasted barley shochu, for example, from Kami Spirits, and it will give you this kind of roasted coffee and cacao flavors, and will give you a lesser ABV levels, and that's what we all want. Have 2 espresso martinis instead of 1.
So what is a wine for barbecue season? Here in Britain, the minute the sun comes out, we start burning sausages and making our friends eat them. What washes that down well?
Well, it sounds like a fantastic time to enjoy some English sparkling wine, actually. Maybe a cliche, but yes, definitely drink something local, like Ratfini Blanc de Noir from 2019. Fantastic wine, delicious, super fresh. Or if you like something blushy, rosé, a Gasborn did a fantastic rosé that will give you great satisfaction. And also it's available in magnums.
Wow. So you've got to drink a lot of it. If you open a magnum, are you duty bound to finish it, do you think? The same night?
No, you haven't. You probably have about 1 or 2 days to finish it, but yeah, better to finish it right away.
Okay. Now, what about something before bed? I mean, I guess I would traditionally have a whiskey, but there are some really good dessert wines.
Yes, actually, if I'll go classic, I would definitely drink a Mosel Riesling, a Spätlese, Egenmüller if possible. If not wine, let's go to Northern Europe. Let's go to Sweden and try some ice cider. Fantastic product. A lot of freshness. A lot of this ripe apples, almost like an apple tart tatin, like in a glass. Fantastic wine.
Mm-hmm. Now, as I said at the beginning, Japanese spirits and wine is your expertise. Tell me about Japanese wine.
Actually, recently, I started working with some Japanese producers in the northern island of Hokkaido. It's a cool climate, Pinot Noir enjoys a little bit of coolness, like in Burgundy or in South Australia, in Geelong. So they start planting vines in about 2010, and one of the domains that has reached the shores of England is Domain Takahiko. Beautiful Pinot Noir with a lot of intensity, aged in French oak, drinking super well now when it's still 3 years of age. That's what's happening in Japan. They grow some koshu in Yamanashi Prefecture in mainland, in Honshu Island. That is also interesting, but it's quite it's lacking the intensity for Western palates, if I may. But it's coming to our shores already with increasing demand for sake and shochu in England or in America, in Europe. These products are coming strong to us, and they boost with this earthiness, this subtlety, but kind of umami character, lighter acidity, and more elegant palate, elegant structure. Those are the drinks that are coming from Japan. If you want to go classic, a bit more traditional, sake is drinking really, really well now. A lot of the producers are showing that they can you can actually enjoy sake with not necessarily Japanese food. One of my best pairings that I ever had in my life probably was a Scotch egg. Yes, Scotch egg with some Junmai style sake. Yeah, it works super well, and that's what we need to explore. Sake can be not maybe an everyday drink, not your barbecue drink, but it can become a pairing in a Michelin-star restaurant, a pairing for the dishes that you would never think of Japanese drinks.
We're back with the Curator, and now we have a very special global countdown this week to celebrate Switzerland's victory on Eurovision this year. This time I look back at the all-time ever Swiss songs.
Time now for the Global Countdown with Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Faye, we're doing something a little different today.
You know, Eurovision just happened on Saturday. Switzerland won for the third time ever. A very well-deserved victory for Nemo, the Swiss entry. So I've decided, Georgina, to look at the best-selling, most popular Swiss singles from Swiss artists at the Swiss charts. And it's interesting because, I like to look at the charts every week. There are not many Swiss artists even in their own charts. So I wonder if Nemo's victory could help, actually, a little bit the music industry in the country. And here we're going to remind that there are some great Swiss artists out there. But I think we should start with Nemo.
Well, just before we do, can I just query his name? Is it Nemo as in finding, the clownfish, or is it Nemo as in Nemo me impune licessit, the Latin phrase, no one provokes me with impunity?
Probably the second one. I am not 100% confirmed with that, but it's kind of cute if it was the first one as well. Some of the Swiss newspapers, they had a little bit of fun with the headlines. Europe finally found Nemo, which we're going to listen to it right now.
That's where I found my kingdom come. My heart beats like a drum.
Nemo connected with people, Georgina. This song is operatic. There's a little bit of hip-hop, drumming, bass. Clearly, Nemo is a very talented musician here.
I mean, that just had all the Eurovision tick boxes, didn't it? The key change, everything. I mean,
great staging.
Yeah.
That disc there. I mean, I wouldn't be able to do it. I would feel a little bit dizzy.
But you were there watching it, weren't you?
Yes, it was quite impressive. Well deserved for Nemo.
What was the atmosphere like?
Well, I've been saying here it was tense outside the arena because of all the controversies, the Dutch disqualification, a lot of people disagreeing about Israel being there. But I have to say, Georgina, in the end, people were happy. And I think Sweden did well. It was a very complicated Eurovision to host. But I think in the end, there were no casualties. There were no other issues. But I think the EBU is having a lot of meetings at the moment as we speak to see how they're going to handle it.
Back to Switzerland.
Yes.
Right, so if Nemo's your number 5, who is your number 4?
We're going back to 1977, and this song was actually an Eurovision entry, but it was only the 6th place at that year. But it became one of the biggest hits in Switzerland ever. It's very fun. There's a little bit of Schlager in there. It's a Pepe Leinhardt band with Swiss Lady.
Spielt der Rock'n'Roll, spielt der Dixieland und war bekannt als die One-Man-Mountain-Band. Sagte, durch sie allein ist die Welt voll Musik. Sie gibt mir alles und vergisst mich nie. Sie ist meine Swiss Lady und ich ein Mann aus den Bergen.
You were asking me what's Schlager. That's exactly what you just did, Eugene.
What,
that little dance.
German dance there.
That little German dance. Or Swiss dance in this case. And Pepe's still going on. He's 78 years old now. And he's kind of a band leader. There's a group of 6 of them. But Swiss Lady was a massive hit. It's an homage to his country and to all Swiss ladies out there.
Who have you got at number 3?
Number 3, that's a more recent one. That was from 2018. And this song was on the top of the Swiss charts for 21 weeks. That's an impressive number. It's a rap duo from Bern. I mean, I say rap. I mean, you're going to hear it. It's not, you know. Shall we have a listen, actually?
Absolutely.
It's Low and Leduc with 079. And as with any kind of popular song, there's some controversies to it as well. I was reading some articles trying to say, why 079? Apparently this song is about a man that keeps insisting, asking a woman for her phone number. But he's very insistent. I mean, he keeps on asking. And some people are saying, wow, he's a bit of a stalker. I mean, is this song cool or not? So there was a lot of discussion in Switzerland at the time. Nevertheless, one of the biggest hits in Switzerland's history.
Now, the next one, is it about a ridiculously small dog or a place in, I think, Mexico?
I think it's about the dog. It's the lovely chihuahuas. I mean, this song, Georgina, it was not a hit only in Switzerland. It was, I believe, number 1 in Spain, in France. It was even on the advert for Coca-Cola in France as well. There was a Brazilian version of that song called My Little Dog, Chihuahua, but singing in Portuguese. It was everywhere. It was for kids, for adults. It is, of course, DJ Bobo, who is a bit of a Swiss legend. He's a music producer. He raps at times. But shall we have a listen to Chihuahua,
Yes.
one of the biggest hits ever from Switzerland?
Chihuahua!
I gotcha.
Chihuahua.
Chihuahua. I mean, I love it. I love the silliness of DJ Bobo, and we should never underestimate DJ Bobo. And I think there's a little bit of a segue here, if you don't mind, because we have more DJ Bobo. I spoke to some of my Swiss friends. Some of them are a bit embarrassed, and I don't think they should be, because, DJ Bobo, he has been an Eurovision entry for Switzerland. I think he's the best-selling Swiss artist of all time. So next year, when the event's going to be in Switzerland, I guarantee you that he will be there. And he's going on a tour as well, starting in August. And guess his first tour, where is it going to be? In São Paulo, my hometown. That just shows how international he is. And then he's heading to Santiago, to Poland. But at number 1, that song was everywhere in 1993. It is another classic by DJ Bobo, Somebody Dance With Me.
Like round and round, upside down, living all life to the feet on the ground. Then put your hands up in the air, wave like you just don't care. And if you're ready to rock, then rock with me. Somebody say, oh yeah, oh yeah, ow.
As our producer, who is in fact the musician Paige B, has just said, it's hardly Whitney Houston.
It's not Whitney Houston, but, it's hard to compete with her voice as well. But, he does have some great rhymes on Chihuahua as well. And if I may recommend, you should go back to his old catalog. He had 27 hits in Switzerland. One of my favorites is Everybody. Everybody sing a song. I'm not going to sing. I think we should ask for our producer Paige. She has a much better voice than me. But well done, DJ DJ Bobo.
Absolutely. A double dose of DJ Bobo there. My cup runneth over, and I'm so glad you've told me there are 27 more that I can subject myself to. Fernando Augusto Pacheco, thank you very much indeed.
We head to Vietnam's Ho Chi Minh City. It is a culinary destination in its own right. The bustling metropolis is packed full of innovative restaurants and bars, and it's difficult to buzz around the city without drinking in its hallowed coffee culture. Here, Monocle's Hannah Fan takes us on a day of dining in the city.
Ho Chi Minh City, known as Saigon, is the Vietnamese capital Hanoi's bigger, noisier, and livelier sister. The vibrant metropolis has a distinctive soundtrack made up of the collective purr of thousands of motorbikes and roving street vendors promising the best meal in the city. From 50-cent sandwiches stuffed to the brim with grilled pork and pickled veggies served from the back of a motorbike, to $170 bowls of pho with Wagyu beef and foie gras in Michelin-star eateries. You can find something to eat for every budget and occasion. In Vietnam, it's almost mandatory to start the day with a coffee, and there are plenty of spots serving up iced coffee sweetened with condensed milk and other uniquely Vietnamese creations. Down the street from the hollowed Fine Arts Museum in District 1 is Le Caf, a coffee house dedicated to celebrating Vietnam's most beloved drink through delicious brews, exhibitions, and workshops. Stop by to enjoy refreshing drinks such as Café Chung, a rich espresso topped with whipped egg yolk and sweetened condensed milk custard. I opt for the Café Moi, a slowly dripped coffee with salted cream on top, and Le Caf has one of the best renditions in the city. Whilst you're in the area, pop by the museum itself to check out the international and local collection of art, coffee in hand. Cum Tam is a Saigon lunch specialty, meaning broken rice. Cum Tam was originally a poor man's dish made up of the leftover rice fed to livestock, mixed with whatever ingredients were available at home. Now, the dish is a ubiquitous part of the city and can be found on just about any street. Ban Kun Hong Han is a spot in the bustling District 1. Its version of the Cum Tam, the Cum Sung Dak Bit, comes with barbecue pork, crispy pork skin, an omelet, and pickled veggies. Drench in a mix of fish sauce and chili, mix and enjoy. For hearty home-cooked style meals meant to be shared with others, Quan Bui is a must-visit for an evening meal. I recommend going to the garden location in the quiet residential area of Thao Dien for secluded alfresco dining surrounded by lush greenery. Whilst you're there, do try the caramelized pork belly and egg, braised catfish, and starfruit beef soup. All pair perfectly with a bowl of sticky white rice. Some of the best of Ho Chi Minh street food is on display every night at Ho Con Rua, Turtle Lake, one of the city's most iconic modernist structures. A tall concrete flower juts out of this small lake and is covered by concrete pathways that provide a perfect space for vendors and students from the nearby university who flock here for a late-night snack. No trip to Ho Chi Minh is complete without sampling Ban Chang Chon, a shredded rice paper salad with beef jerky, crispy peanuts, and boiled quail eggs, or bap sao, sautéed sweet corn with fish sauce, dried shrimp, and lots of chili. Both of these treats are available to try at this vibrant market. Even at night, the air is hot and sticky, so there'll be plenty of vendors hawking sweet, icy beverages. Nuk Mia, sugarcane juice, or Nuk Tak, juice kumquat, an orange-lime hybrid, are surefire ways to cool down. If you're looking for a late-night tipple, Ho Chi Minh has no shortage of bars and drinking dens. After all, Vietnam is the largest consumer of beer in Southeast Asia. A standout on the budding craft brewery scene is Pasteur Street Brewing Co. Founded in 2014, this homegrown brewery serves American-style craft beer with Vietnamese flavors, and now has tap rooms all over the country. The location on Hoang Sa Street is a gorgeous spot for a night out, with riverside views, and there's often live music playing throughout the week. If you can't decide what to get from the vast menu of tropical flavors, get the beer flight. You can pick and choose 6 different flavors. For something lighter, go for the Pomelo IPA or Passion Fruit Ale. If you're in the mood for something heavier, the Cycle Imperial Chocolate Stout, brewed with chocolate from local producer Maru and vanilla beans from seaside town Moi Ne, is a delicious way to end your culinary tour of Ho Chi Minh.
And now to Toast Stories for this week. Tomás Pinheiro told us how Seoul's first mixed-use development, Seongsan Sangha, came to be, and the challenges it faces ahead.
Never demolish, always transform. The principle defended by Pritzker laureates Anne Lacaton and Jean-Philippe Vassal finds resonance in Seoul. Notably, with Solo 7017, an elevated park created on a former overpass inspired by New York City's High Line. But also with the less discussed yet equally impressive Seongsan, the country's first mixed-use development, which underwent much-needed renovations a few years ago. Seongsan is a megastructure in its most literal form, a city within a city, conceived by Kim Jong-un, South Korea's most famous architect. The complex comprises several interconnected buildings, lined up one after the other and linked by lengthy decks on either side. The entire structure spans 50 meters wide and 1.2 kilometers long, a concrete behemoth stretching across Iljeru at the heart of the South Korean capital. Everything was built between 1967 and 1972 in a vast area between the 14th century Jongmyo Shrine and Namsam Hill. The plot had been left barren during the Japanese colonial period to prevent the spread of fire, but it quickly turned into a slum. The development combines industrial, commercial and residential areas, including a hotel with over 250 rooms. Retail zones are on the lower levels. Warehouses, manufacturing and repair shops fill the internal passageways, and offices occupy the higher floors, flanking wider corridors and the occasional sunlit atrium. Housing units sit above retail, and everything is connected by a network of covered motorways, pedestrian bridges and staircases. After completion, the modern apartments at Seongsan became highly sought-after homes, coveted by politicians and celebrities. Among the reasons for the popularity were the elevators, then still a novelty in residential complexes. Reflecting the miracle on the Han, Seongsan became a vibrant destination for home appliances and electronic products and contributed to the development of Iljeru as a light industry hub, conveniently located in central Seoul. At its zenith, the commercial activities inside were so diverse that rumors circulated hinting at the possibility of finding all the parts necessary to build a nuclear submarine within the narrow corridors. Some even speculated that such a project was actively underway somewhere within the complex. Seongsan's glory days were short-lived though. The development of Gangnam drove many of the city's wealthier residents to move away from its center, and when the Yongsan Electronic Market opened on the former site of a kimchi market, this became the new epicenter for all things high-tech, attracting many of Seongsan's most prominent retailers. Already in the 70s, the complex showed its initial signs of decline. Many apartments and offices were repurposed into lifeless storage units, while the hidden maze-like interiors provided a perfect environment for informal activities. This included the illicit trade of smuggled goods, replicated hardware and software, and the duplication and dissemination of pornography brought into the country by American soldiers. By the 90s, Seongsan had fallen into general despair, marked by decaying facilities and the build-up of trash in the common areas. In 2008, a controversial demolition plan was put forward by Mayor Oh Si-hoon for Seongsan to open space for central green axis and its surrounding blocks for glass skyscrapers. The project moved quickly at first, with the northernmost units demolished the following year, but financial complications and opposition from the Cultural Heritage Administration halted the works, with the latter imposing restrictions on the construction of high-rises near cultural properties. When Park Won-soon took over mayoralty in 2012, he and his city architect, a position he created, favored the revival approach to city interventions, among other reasons to avoid community displacement. In 2015, he scrapped his predecessor's glitzy redevelopment plan and began a regeneration project to tackle issues at Seongsan. The goal was to save it by further integrating it into the neighborhood and the city, all while maintaining the existing ecosystem through official anti-gentrification measures. Today, an inclined plaza occupies the space where the demolished unit once stood, linking the complex to the entrance of Jongmyo Shrine. Remarkably, the builders discovered the remains of a Johnson-era construction on the very spot underground, which are now exposed in an open-air museum. The original elevated decks on both sides underwent significant renovations to feature public amenities such as elevators, stairs and ramps, and improve connectivity with the street level. Glass enclosed units now incorporate their expanse, welcoming new businesses like cafes, restaurants and makerspaces. There's also a small library, an electronics museum, and a showroom showcasing the various products and components created within. The University of Seoul operates a small campus in the basement, mostly focusing on research and business incubation. This initiative was part of the intention Mayor Park had to bridge the skills of an older generation of tenants with the imagination of younger professionals and recent graduates. As fate would have it, Seongsan intersects with Seoul's cherished Gyeonggi-cheon stream, a once-neglected waterway revitalized into a pedestrian route and city park in 2005. An elevated plaza now sits at this junction, directly above the stream, providing easy access for tenants to join other Seoulites for a walk along the water. Seongsan's rooftop was also repurposed into a public area that offers excellent views of the South Korean capital, showcasing all its typical contrasts of old and new, rough and polished. While the renovations took care of the external areas, there is criticism that they did little to regenerate the most hidden parts of the structure, still largely dominated by storage units. Also, intentionally or not, the project didn't alter the complex's reputation as a decidedly brutalist eyesore in the city, which garners many detractors. For better or worse, the project has raised Seongsan's profile. On weekdays, craftspeople and office workers, designers and artists traverse its alleyways, while on weekends, Seoul's youngsters flock to its cafes, undoubtedly seeking the most Instagrammable shot. With the metal from the last phase of the project still cooling, Seongsan and its surrounding community are once again under threat of demolition. Mayor Oh is back in office, and he has brought about the resurrection of his redevelopment plan, which now places a strong emphasis on increasing Seoul's green space ratio. He aims to transform the area into a quote-unquote eco-friendly downtown with skyscrapers lining an 11,000 square meter park. Achieving such results through large-scale demolition and displacement are only two inconsistencies in a project filled with greenwashing buzzwords. Well connected through public transport and in the middle of one of Asia's wealthiest cities, both Seongsan and Iljeiro occupy a prime patch of real estate. Unsurprisingly, large investors have already shown interest. At the time of writing, entire blocks were being emptied and razed in Iljeiro, and both the university campus and the rooftop at Seongsan were closed. Overall, there seems to be little enthusiasm surrounding the success of Mayor Park's rejuvenation. What the future holds for the megastructure and its neighboring community remains to be seen.
And finally, we read Estelle Roux's essay from the latest iteration of Monocle Companion. It is an ode to the kiosk.
One summer about 10 years ago, the sleepy Helsinki suburb I grew up in transformed overnight into the city's hippest neighborhood. For most of my life, the quaint wooden villas and communal gardens of Käpylä offered little for teenagers to do beyond aimless visits to the supermarket. That was until a group of young entrepreneurs laid their eyes on the abandoned yellow kiosk that stood lonely in the main square. They decided to open up the shutters, set out a few scraggly chairs, and start serving cinnamon buns and coffee. Soon, the park was hosting spontaneous flea markets and live concerts centered around this thriving small business. The kiosk's success boiled down to nostalgia. Everyone in Helsinki of a certain generation has childhood memories of buying nekku, a traditional kind of fudge lollipop, from their local lippakioski. The kiosk's nickname translates roughly as cap kiosk and comes from its long upturned awning that looks a little like a baseball cap. The first had been designed in the 1920s by Gunnar Taucher, Helsinki's city architect, and were added to the streetscape up until the 1950s. At about the same time in Berlin, German couple Anne-Marie and Martin von Löw embarked on a far more ambitious kiosk rescue mission. On a trip to Poland, they had found and fallen in love with the K67, a 1960s kiosk that can be spotted in various states of disrepair around Eastern Europe. They tracked down its designer, the Slovenian architect Saša Mehtig, and with his help found an out-of-use K67, shipped it over to Berlin, restored it, and reopened it as a cafe in a Kreuzberg courtyard. Today, the couple runs the cafe, as well as a side business sourcing and renovating old kiosks, lending them to the likes of Bottega Veneta for pop-up events. The yellow booth works like a beam of sunshine in Berlin and must have had an even stronger effect when it landed in 1960s Yugoslavia. Mehtig was just 25 in 1966 when he came up with a square modular booth that can be linked to others. The K67s proliferated across Yugoslavia, making any kind of commercial activity possible within a standardized shell. Perfect for a young country trying to get used to communism. Compare kiosks of different nationalities, and it becomes clear that almost by accident, they end up condensing the best qualities of the places they belong to. That applies to their design as well as to their contents. The word kiosk originates from köşk, Turkish for a small open-air pavilion. And still today, the kiosk offers something you could do without but would prefer not to. That turns out to vary from city to city. In Helsinki, kiosks were always heavy on sweets. Go to Rome and the edicole are stacked densely with newspapers. Lisbon and the Kiosk are spots for a drink and some salgados. Or Athens, and you'll find that the periptera are all about cigarettes. In Helsinki, many lippakioski are still abandoned, and no wonder. The city requires new tenants to foot the bill for renovations, despite the municipality being the operation that allowed them to deteriorate in the first place. Fixing them up would be a small investment that would strengthen the city's character. In Capula, when the lippakioski tenants ran into financial trouble, the neighborhood responded with a crowdfunding campaign. Last summer, the kiosk reopened with a new trio of entrepreneurs, and on the first day, the queue stretched across the square. A kiosk might deal in small change, but it adds up to a precious public good. For Monocle in Berlin, this is Stella Roos.
Thank you, Stella. And that's all we've got time for this week's edition of The Curator. The show was produced by David Stevens and presented by me, Fernando Augusto Pacheco. Join us again next week, and thank you for listening.